I can get income protection inside of super. I can get my life insurance inside of super. I can get this thing that says TPD inside of super. Can I get trauma insurance inside of super?
No, that's the short
If I ask really nicely, if I go to my Australian super account and I just say, please, can I get it? Why can't I get it?
So the reason for it is it's not just a matter of getting the insurance claim, it's then a matter of releasing it from the super fund when it is owned in the super fund. The things that can lead to a trauma claim are typically easier to meet than the conditions of release under super. So you may very well, if you somehow have trauma in your super fund, get paid under your trauma, but then all the money gets stuck in your super fund because you don't meet the condition of release.
Yeah, anyone out there who thinks, I must have trauma inside my super fund because this thing says total disablement or something, there's very nuanced rules. Like you have to have a self-managed super fund and you have to have set your trauma insurance up before 2014. So basically anyone listening, you don't have trauma insurance if your only policies are inside of your super fund. Hey there, tonight we are doing a deep dive episode on trauma insurance. So today I got Matthew Warren, one of our advisors. Thanks for joining me, Matt.
Most welcome.
So we've just been out for dinner. We're at our advisor offsite in Torquay, but we went to Lawn, we went to Toddy's for dinner. How'd you enjoy dinner?
It was fantastic. I was asked at one point, what would you eat before you died? And one of the meals we had tonight was on that list of the two options. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
All right, trauma insurance. So let's start off talking about trauma insurance, or the other term for trauma insurance is critical illness, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to talk trauma insurance. So what is it?
Cool. So trauma insurance is a lump sum payout that you can receive if you have been diagnosed or suffer a listed event that is listed in your policy or your PDS, your product disclosure statement. So typically things like heart attacks, cancers, stroke. If you lose your limbs, lose some sight, or all your sight, the list goes on. There's typically about 40 conditions covered.
Awesome. So next question, how is trauma insurance different to income protection or TPD or total permanent disablement?
Yep. It's a really common question that we get. So income protection is a payout if you can't work because of a medical reason, and it's pretty broad. So any medical reason, you can't work, provided it's not excluded, you get paid a percentage of your income. TPD is when you're totally and permanently disabled. So you've had an injury or illness, you can never work again, and you've had a couple of doctors sign off on that. Trauma is different because it's not about if you can't work. They don't worry about that whatsoever. There's a set list of definitions that some of which we've gone through. If you're diagnosed or suffer one of those listed conditions, all you need from your doctor is a report saying you've suffered this, you've been diagnosed with this. You send that into the insurer. They should be paying out pretty soon after, provided that condition is one of those listed.
That's right. Yeah, some conditions are based on like a diagnosis. Some are based on like severity of the condition. So I'm sure we'll go into a bit more nuance on that. But next question, and a question we get a lot from our clients is like, I've got private health insurance. Like, I'm going to be sorted. I'm going to be covered. So talk to me about like, how does trauma play with private health insurance? Do we actually need trauma if we have private health insurance?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have. So private health is typically if you need a specific medical treatment or, procedure, it helps with some or all of the cost with that. And it may help you choose your particular doctor and fund some of that cost. But that is only covering for the medical procedure. So if you need heart surgery, that is paid for. Doesn't necessarily go towards all or most of the hospital stay. If you need to go and park there, if you need to travel or relocate for a longer term treatment, private health is not covering that. You're paying for that out of pocket, or you're taking money from friends and family to pay for that. So it's private health is to pay for a specific medical procedure. Trauma can cover everything outside of that, including some of those things. If you may not have private health and need to fund some more of that out of pocket.
Yeah, that's right. I'm very fortunate. We live in kind of like one of the best, near one of the best hospitals in Melbourne. So it's, relatively easy for us. We wouldn't need to relocate if something happened to me or Kate. But it is a significant impact. Like, I had someone close to my family go through that experience and it was a massive impact. It's, yes, the medical bills, may not be stacking up because of private health insurance, but the time out of work and this family had 2 young kids or 2 young kids, 3 young kids? No, 2. They've got 3 now, 2 young kids at the time. And it was just like, how do we juggle these little ones? Like, they came to our house for a little bit and went to, other family for a little bit. So there is a lot involved with some of these trauma events that happen. So next question I have, like, I can get income protection inside of super. I can get my life insurance inside of super. I can get this thing that says TPD inside of super. Can I get trauma insurance inside of super?
No. That's the short
If I ask really nicely, if I go to my Australian super account and I just say, please, 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 can I get it? Why can't I get it?
No. So it used to be available.
Come on,
so
Matt. Give me my trauma insurance.
If you can go back in time a little bit, back to 2014, but pre-2014, you may have been able to. So the reason for it is it's not just a matter of getting the insurance claim. It's then a matter of releasing it from the super fund when it is owned in the super fund. The reasons, the things that can lead to a trauma claim are typically easier to meet than the conditions of release under super. So you may very well, if you somehow have trauma in your super fund, get paid under your trauma, but then all the money gets stuck in your super fund because you don't meet the condition of release.
Yeah, anyone out there who thinks, I must have trauma inside my super fund because this thing says total disablement or something, there's very nuanced rules. Like you have to have a self-managed super fund and you have to have set your trauma insurance up before 2014. So basically anyone listening, you don't have trauma insurance if your only policies are inside of your super fund. Now, things like life insurance and disability through my super fund, they're tax deductible to the super fund. Things like income protection, I can get a tax deduction at tax time if I've got that. Talk to me about trauma insurance. Can I get a tax deduction?
No, unfortunately not.
Matt, you're boring. I can't pay for it through super. I can't get a tax deduction for these policies. Talk to me why. Why can't I get a tax deduction?
It all comes down to the rules from the ATO. So typically the only things you can get a tax deduction for, if it's to generate an income, essentially. So income protection, tax deductible. Trauma, not so much because it's not deemed as an income source. It's just a lump sum pay.
Now, that is annoying when it comes to paying my premiums. I don't get a tax deduction for it. But the great thing is, when you get paid out a claim, you get the full amount in your bank account and the ATO don't take any of that. So you're not boring, the ATO is boring, is what I'm hearing. But as we said, the good thing is when you're getting a claim and it's $190,000 or whatever the claim may be, the ATO is not going, well, hey, I'm really sorry you got that, had that cancer, but thank you, we'll take $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 for ourselves. All right, Matt, next question. What are some of the conditions that are covered under a trauma policy?
So the most common ones that we talk about are cancers, heart events, so cardiovascular, and stroke. But as I mentioned earlier, there are about 40. So if I just rattle off a few, I definitely couldn't tell you all 40 off the top of my head with every single insurer. So coma is covered, dementia, blindness, deafness, cardiomyopathy, heart attacks, coronary artery bypass surgery, idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension of specified severity. So the list goes on. I think realistically, you'd want to be looking at the product disclosure statement when it comes to it. Most will be very, very, very similar. There might be one or two of those things that differs from insurer to insurer.
That's right. And one of the things, if you are going through a medical event, reach out to your advisor who's helped you set up these policies. They're the best place to go because they will be able to, we get emails all the time from clients from, significantly severe things that are easily claimable. And, we get to support them through that time where they're going through something really difficult. In the last 12 months, before we did this, you asked me to have a look at, what clients we've helped and what conditions, all cancers. All young, I think. Let me just look. Some sub 30, everyone under 40. Our clients are, generally quite younger. One of the 4 was in their 20s and all cancer. And it doesn't mean, why don't I just get this policy just for cancer? To be honest, even if that's the only reason you get it for that. We all know, people who have had these trauma events. But yeah, some of those conditions are like, something like MS may be covered, but the illness needs to have progressed significantly where there is impact on your life for it to be claimable. I was talking to Amy about my wife having meningitis. And after the whole thing and the experience and posting photos on Instagram about my beautiful wife, I then thought, actually, we've got trauma insurance. Let me have a look at the conditions. Meningitis was there, but it was bacterial meningitis, and it needed to be really significant. So there are some things where if you're going through a medical event, reach out to your advisor and say, hey, can you read that 120-page PDF for me and tell me roughly if this is a claimable event? Okay, cool. So next question, how does trauma insurance pay out? Like, how does it actually work? If we have a trauma event and we are eligible, how does it work?
It really just, it's probably the simplest of claims. It really just comes down to providing the medical evidence from a doctor or specialist saying this is what has been suffered or this is the condition that has been diagnosed. Getting that, providing it to the insurer, waiting for them to assess it, make sure it matches their policy documents, and then making sure you've got the right bank account details on file for them to pay out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, trauma is very easy because you'll have all these medical reports, like something like cancer. You'll have all the medical reports anyway because you're getting the diagnosis, they're doing the biopsies, so you will have this medical evidence on hand, or if not, your specialist will be able to easily help you fill out the claim forms. We did have a client who had cancer and had to go to Taiwan. Didn't have to, but chose to go to Taiwan. All the reports were in Mandarin, and then we sent it, or Cantonese, Mandarin, not sure. Forgive me for anyone from Taiwan if I've chosen the wrong language, but it was all in another language. We sent it to the insurer and went, how do we do this? And the insurer was great. They were like, oh, okay, we actually need it translated because it needs to be verified that it's in English and the conditions have been met. But even that, with that complexity, it was actually really straightforward still. It did make it longer because the insurer, the claims assessor, head of claims, had never had that scenario before. So they were like, good question. I don't know how to solve this problem, but we were able to solve it and get that claim paid out. All right. Now, let's talk about statistics. Let's talk about how prevalent it is. We all know someone with cancer, but from an insurer's point of view, how many claims are being paid out? What percentage of claims are being paid out for certain things?
It's incredibly prevalent, but I think rather than look at the chances of something happening, we can just look at the stats from the insurers. So, and keeping in mind, this is one insurer, one of the bigger ones. But if they're one of 10. So there's plenty more than this. And this is just for the last 10 years. For all age groups, for males and females, they've paid out about $282 million over the last 10 years just in trauma. So it's not including income protection, not including TPD or life. And typically people have less trauma than, they'll claim on income protection or their TPD or their life cover. So it's interesting to see the differences in between males and females with who suffers what or what has been paid out in claims. So just the top three really. For males, 175 million has been paid out, 107 million for females. So according to this insurer, more males are statistically more likely to suffer these trauma events. Or there are more males with insurance.
Yeah, I think it's stats will say females are more likely to suffer the conditions, but the claims experience from this insurer, it must be that more males have actually got the policies.
Yeah. So we can see that by looking at, if we look at cancer for males and females is the highest reason for claim. For men, 51.86% cancer, females 74.96%.
Yeah, wow.
So much, much higher levels of cancer in females, according to this insurer. And then cardiovascular. So for men, 34.07% and 9.01% for females.
So I should know math pretty well as a financial advisor, but let me do the math. It's like 80% is cancer and cardiovascular for men. And then what
86, 86.
And then what was it for women?
Let's
do math.
About 84, 85.
Yeah. Great. Over 85 for those two things is a majority of claims. Even though, yes, there are like 40 odd conditions. There are things like MS. There are things like, meningitis and all of those other conditions. I guess the reason why insurers include it is really just to go, hey, we don't want you to suffer a traumatic event or a critical illness, is what a lot of insurers call it, and just not get this cover that you've been paying for. So yes, it makes up a small portion of our claims, but it actually makes up a small portion of the overall premiums will be associated with those other things. But they want to try and capture enough without basically saying, hey, the most obscure, conditions that 1 in a million people will be covered under this. There may be some illnesses or injury or, critical illnesses that aren't captured under a policy. So talk to me about going and getting policies. Like, do we actually get exclusions on policies? Like I know with income protection and disability, we may get a mental health exclusion. Talk to me about trauma. Do we get exclusions on that?
Yes, you certainly can. You can get loadings as well. Unlike income protection TPD, where you don't necessarily need a diagnosis to get an exclusion. You just need symptoms of something. That is less common with trauma, especially, but your family history often comes into play. So things like family history of breast cancer or ovarian cancer, those are pretty common reasons to fall under. But because with trauma, it is a set list of specific events, unless you've had one of those events or the sort of lead up to potentially one of those events or family history of that, there's typically not as many exclusions on trauma covers as you would see on income protection and TPD.
Yeah, we did a recording with Zaria Bell, who today, well, I don't know when it's coming out on the internet, and how all this fancy stuff works. But we talked about a lot about cancer and family history when it comes to like women's health conditions. So things like breast cancer, family history, breast cancer. So it's a big deep dive that we recorded an hour and a half worth of recording. So if you're interested in about family history with regards to some of that stuff, definitely check out that video. So a lot of people say, look, I'm young and healthy. Yeah, one of our new team members in the office told me the other day he doesn't need insurance. He's young and healthy. And everyone else in the office, actually, what happened, Ash said to me, hey, Phil, Seb thinks he's young and healthy, doesn't need insurance. And then I went on like this 15-minute tirade about why he doesn't need insurance and being young, his income is the most valuable it's going to be forever. Anyway, went on this big tangent. But a lot of people think young, healthy, why do I actually need this cover?
Well, it doesn't discriminate for a start. Looking at another insurer's claim statistics, they've more recent, but their youngest claimant is 27. So it's still very, very, very young. And I don't anticipate that anyone that's ever been diagnosed with one of these events has gone, yeah, I probably deserve that or expected that based on how I've been. I think everyone who's ever been diagnosed or suffers one of these events goes, that was a real shock and it came out of nowhere. And, exactly what you said, you've got a huge time frame in front of you of, well, it depends on cancer and the severity and the treatments that come with it, but that could significantly impact your ability to earn into the future. So whether it's something physical that is impacted, or mental potentially as well, if you have brain cancer, that could reduce your mental capacity for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I was really taken aback, and something that I remember, I think for a long time when it comes to insurance stuff is, I did a video with my middle one that we put online, and after we recorded, because I didn't want to name any names on the recording, but after it I said, oh, do you know anyone who's had any of these kind of things? And she literally just without taking a beat said, like, rattled off like 4 or 5 like names, like not even just obscure people. She knew their names, people who were close. And I think if someone asked me, I would be able to rattle off some of those names, but I like really close. Not that I would forget people really close, but we've got like, cousins here or whatever. And yeah, Willow, 11 years old was like, oh yes, this person had cancer and then passed away, had, cancer, and is in remission, had cancer and passed away. Like it was really eye-opening to hear her just talk about these really serious medical events and she's 11 and 5 people really close to her, aunties, uncles, like cousins. Like it was kind of really a big shock to go, I even working in this space, underestimate how prevalent these trauma events are in kind of, our society. So, I'm more passionate than I ever have been and super passionate about it. But talk about costs. Insurance costs us money. How much does trauma insurance cost?
Not as much as you'd think. It is one of the more expensive covers, just naturally because...
I think it's going to cost me $2. So is it more than what I think?
Yes, it will cost you more than $2, okay, unfortunately.
Right. It is relatively affordable. I'm being facetious, obviously. But when we think about the prevalence of it and we think about what it covers, it can be relatively affordable.
For $100,000 to $200,000 of trauma,
yes,
for someone in their sort of early 30s, I would be surprised if it's more than $40, $50 a month.
Yeah.
So it's really not. And look, it depends. If you take a level premium, yes, it might be a little bit more expensive, but then you're juggling long term versus short term. How much cover you need, whether you're taking $300,000 or $100,000, really comes down to what you need and
Yeah. And
so many factors.
And the brilliant thing about insurance, it's a lever. If that cost, the $40 a month, let's say it ends up being for a few $100,000, is too much, we understand there's a cost of living, then great, halve it. Your premiums will halve. And then, other features or benefits that are included that we can maybe dial back on. So that's the brilliant thing about insurance. It's a lever. We can dial up or dial down. It's not a matter of saying, take this much or go home or nothing. It is literally this much. Do I want to increase, decrease, or nothing? So can I reduce the cost of the premiums? So if you said to me, Matt, it's going to cost me $40 a month, how would I go about reducing the cost?
I think first step, chat with your advisor. If you have one, you probably will if you've got trauma cover.
Yeah.
So depending on the type of premium, you can look at that. If you're on level, you can consider stepped, but just make sure you're making the informed decision, thinking long-term or short-term. Second step would just be, looking, like you said, look at the level of cover. Maybe you took it out 5-10 years ago and it's gone up a little bit with indexation. Your situation may have changed. Do you need that much cover anymore? If it's affordable, maybe keep it where it is. But if you have, maybe at the time you took out an amount to pay off some of your debt, you've now paid off that debt, or you don't necessarily need that paid off. If you were to suffer or be diagnosed as one of these events, you can drop that level of cover off and reduce it back just to have some money to pay off medical bills and replace some of your income.
Yeah, cool. Do we think about it different, or do you think about it different if someone's single versus being in a relationship? If you're in a relationship, can we not have trauma insurance, or is it more important?
I don't know if I should quote your favorite saying to some of the
go. I don't know what I'm going to, I don't know. I say many outrageous things, so let's go.
I'll make it more general, but a partner is not a financial plan.
Yes.
So no, we shouldn't be relying on our partner to carry us through one of these things. Look, if we've got family that we know will support us and you're happy to do that, maybe you're happy to not take as much or any trauma, but we really shouldn't be putting that burden on our partner. What we think about is medical bills. We don't know what those will be, so that is to be determined by yourself and your advisor, and just having a chat and figuring out where you feel comfortable. And then replacement of some income, because with a lot of these diagnoses, there is generally some time, potentially significant time off work, and that's going to come with a loss of income. There could also be additional medical expenses, so not just the upfront, but ongoing forever. Rehabilitation, if you've had a stroke, you can't talk or walk, learning to do those again, that could be lifelong. Or same with medications.
Yeah.
So if you're single, it's just about, okay, what would I need to pay potentially? How much of my income would I need to replace? But if you're in a couple, we also need to think, okay, I may not be able to work. We have a mortgage together that we both contribute a little bit to. We both save X amount for our holidays each year. Now that I can't work, maybe I'm stuck at home in bed, or at hospital a huge amount of time getting radiation or anything else. Then my partner may have a choice. Do they keep working and pay someone to come in and take me to and from hospital if I'm not able to do that myself? And just if I'm at home, maybe they're still working full time. We've still got a child coming up on 2 to look after. Who's going to drop them off? So if I can't do those things, someone has to. And not too many people are going to do that for free. So we may need to pay someone to come in and help with dinners, help with daycare, take me to and from the hospital. Or would my partner stop work as well to provide that care for myself and our children, and making sure the house doesn't burn down?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, 100%. If Kate was to have a traumatic event, I'm going down part-time. I'm working part-time. I'm cutting back on my hours and work commitments significantly to get the family through that. And also, let's just talk very candidly, cancer is scary. You can die. You don't want that scenario to be, Kate, you can get yourself to the hospital. Yeah, all good. I'll just go back to work. I know we want to spend time together because you may pass away soon, but I've got these financial commitments. We have these financial commitments. You don't want to be forced to have to do those things in the worst time of your life. So having a trauma insurance policy that costs you $40 a month, $50 a month, $100 a month, whatever that number is, may be really important in those. Well, it is really important in those situations.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of carry on with that one. So my dad has had prostate cancer. I was in high school at the time. It was all very, very sudden. I had no idea that anything was even wrong until he kind of sat us down and said, "Hey, you're going to go and stay with some friends for a bit." They didn't have insurance, or at least trauma insurance, because I was in high school, so unfortunately I wasn't selling insurance,
sorting it up for them.
And I think maybe if he had, it would have meant that we either could have gone with, or they could have stayed a bit longer, or maybe because we were in the Whitsundays, so there's no big hospitals there. There's just the basic stuff. So he had to fly to Brisbane, and so did my stepmom, and basically they stayed there for a week or two. We went and stayed with friends, and we just had to kind of carry on as things were. But maybe if there was a bit of extra money there, we could have gone with and been there, or had a bit more time to kind of process all of that stuff. But yeah, thinking about that, it was pretty scary, because it was very quick. They went off, and it was kind of like we just had to wait until he came back, or gave us a call to tell us otherwise.
Yeah. And your dad's still with us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just let's not bury the lead. Let's just tie that up in a nice neat bow. But we think about the impact on ourselves going through the treatment. Think about our partners going through the treatment, but it has a massive impact. The kids has a massive impact on, who's the family that we're leaving the kids with. Like, it'll have, some impacts on them as well. Now, what happens if in your dad's situation, so, had cancer, has recovered, like what happens once you recover from a trauma event? Number one, if you haven't spent the money that you got, do you need to give it back? Number two, can you get a policy again?
Yeah, so if you haven't had a policy, for him, if he went and applied for trauma, I mean, at this point, he's a little older, thankfully. You may get the cover, but he may have an exclusion specifically for prostate cancer, or other very closely related cancers, potentially a broader cancer exclusion. But
if he's able to get it at all.
Yes.
Like, one thing is he's had prostate cancer, so he maybe get declined outright.
Yes.
But given it is significant amount of time since then, he may be able to get something.
And we would pre-assess. Basically ask the question before going through the whole application process. Hey, would anyone give this to you? If some would, and there's maybe an exclusion or extra cost even, cool, at least it's an option. Do you still want to take it with these conditions? Yes or no? If you had the cover and you've claimed on it, because prostate cancer is one of those things you can claim on, firstly, you get paid the money. Second question you had was, maybe he had $100,000 payout and his medical bills were $50,000, or the cost of flying to and from no, you don't have to give any of the money back. So the payment is there to use as you see fit for whatever you feel is going to help you get better. So whether that's going to Disneyland, buying a Ferrari, it would be strange.
But if you do you, boo.
Yeah, exactly. So no, you don't have to give it back, and you don't need to prove to the insurer, hey, I've incurred this much cost in my treatment to get paid.
Whatever that benefit amount is, it's like a life insurance policy. Whatever the benefit amount is, you get paid out the full benefit. The great news is the ATO is not taking any of the money. The insurance company is not asking for any of that money back as well. One question I did forget to ask is how long, so if we go through a claim, how long does it actually take to get a payout?
It depends still, but it's generally one of the faster claims to be paid out, because you don't need to then get the reports from multiple doctors necessarily. You don't need to get reports from the employer about what your duties were. You just need to provide the medical certificate or report that says this is what was suffered or diagnosed, and then it's a couple of days to be assessed and then paid out. So
at its simplest form, it is a tick box saying, yes, I have had this diagnosis. Doctor signs off on it, and then give me your payment details, and then you get paid out. The claim forms are a bit more than that, but it's basically that. Do you meet the condition? Yes, you do. Here's the money from the insurance company. And there's, as we talked about before, with the complexity of superannuation owned policies, the policies aren't owned by a super fund. So, we're not dealing with any of that complexity. Now, I got one more question for you. Before I ask you my last question, do you have anything else that you wanted to touch on with regards to trauma insurance?
I mean, look, I think just get some, whoever you do it through, or at least think about it. I think if you have, like we said, family and friends who are loaded, who would happily give you heaps and heaps of money if you ask for it, or if you've got huge amounts of cash sitting there. But if you think that being diagnosed or suffering one of these things would impact you financially, it's worth thinking about. If you think you're not likely to get it, go to GoFundMe. I did it last night. 3 out of the top 5 were just basically people asking for money for medical bills.
Yeah. For trauma-like events.
Pretty
cancer.
much. Cancer, major head traumas. Things.
Yeah, and I think, trauma is the policy that I'm kind of most passionate about. Like it's like children. We all love we love them equally, but we've got a favorite. Trauma insurance is my favorite. I won't tell you who my favorite child is, but trauma insurance is my favorite insurance child because it is so prevalent and it is the most expensive on a sums insured versus premiums. But it's incredibly important to have that cover because, yeah, as you said, GoFundMe is littered with these trauma events that people could have just funded through an insurance policy. So I've always been very abrasive, as you well know, Matt. I'm an abrasive human being sometimes, but I always just tell people to pull your head in, get trauma insurance because it's so important. Now, last question for you. How much trauma insurance do you have?
I don't often say, but I typically make mention of it. I'll normally tell clients I have more than I would ever recommend for most people. I have $358,000 worth of trauma cover. So
great, and you having a family history of it as well is important. I was trying to before we hit record here, I was trying to log in to work out what mine is. I'm pretty sure mine's around similar. I think maybe 330 to 350. I'm not as meticulous with my numbers as you are, Matt. I don't know exactly my number.
Go into why I know the dollar figure,
but we're both incredibly passionate about trauma insurance, and we think it's super important to get cover. So, thank you for your time, Matt.
Thanks, Phil.
Appreciate it.